You're listening to Straight from the Drafts. I'm your host Nao, social media strategist, business cheerleader and chronic oversharer. In this weekly voice note from me, you can expect actionable insights and behind the scenes stories, my best tips and all the encouragement, all with the goal of helping you plan your content with confidence so that you can turn your goals into reality with the support from your social media. So grab a drink, pop in your headphones and let's get into this week's episode. Before we start today's episode, a little disclaimer that one, I have a bit of a sore throat this week, so if my voice cracks in the middle of a sentence, we're just going to power through. But also, this is my third attempt at recording today's episode, because while I was recording, it has become clear to me that I have a lot to say on this topic. I've got all nerdy about it, and I've thought all of the thoughts. I debated splitting it into two, but instead I'm just going to go for a chunkier episode. So today I'm going to cover storytelling content, and within that also talking about content series. So I'll be sharing more about the trends and the shifts that I'm seeing with this kind of content, and also how you can use it across your own marketing to really have an impact. And this is a topic that I've been sat on for ages, and honestly I've been sat on it so long that especially over the last few weeks, I've seen more creators and marketers talking about it, and it's made me doubt whether I should even chime in on the discussion. But instead of feeling like, oh no, there's already so many people talking about it, I've decided to see that instead as a signal that we need to be talking about it. And I also know that I'm in a bit of an echo chamber online. I see a lot from other social media girlies and marketers, so I feel like a lot of people are talking about it, but that might not be your experience. So I just thought I'd share the little internal dilemma that I'm having there before we actually get into the good stuff. I also want to preface this episode by flagging that the word storytelling almost feels like a bit of a buzzword that's everywhere right now, but obviously this is not a new concept at all. Storytelling has always been at the heart of impactful marketing. So if you think about the John Lewis Christmas adverts, for example, the best ones have always told a story, whether that's the friendship between the kid and the man on the moon, or I think there was a dragon and a snowman one year. The impact of those adverts came from the emotions that they stirred up by telling stories. And I think we can learn a lot from other media sources like TV, and I'm going to come on to that, and apply those principles to our online marketing. So no, it's not a new concept, but I do find it really interesting to see the latest wave of how we're seeing this play out on social media, because there are these waves and content trends, and this is definitely one of the latest big shifts that I've seen. Because I'd say a year or so ago, the done thing, the sort of trend that we were all told to follow, was to put the audience into the content. So for example, using hooks like, here's the number one thing you can do to go viral on Instagram. You could add that hook over a 7-second B-roll clip, explain more in the caption, and that would be enough. That would be an effective piece of content. Or create a carousel in Canva with 3 things your Instagram bio should include, and the prompt to your audience would be to save that post because it was packed full of this tips and advice. That content wave was focused on education and making people think, oh, I need that, or oh, I want to know how to do that. But now, instead of you-centered content, we're now seeing this shift towards the I and the we, putting the creator at the center of the content again instead of the audience. And it's the storytelling element that stops this new wave of what could be very self-centered content from actually being self-centered. Because that content is telling a story, and stories have messages and can still teach, but in this way the audience becomes invested and they can relate to it and either put themselves into the story or learn from it. So how am I seeing this show up on social media, and particularly on Instagram right now? The first way is educational content in disguise. So the examples that I gave a minute ago, here's the one thing that you need to do to go viral on Instagram. Instead, that's been flipped around and told as a story. I made this one change to my content and went viral. Or my client implemented this one simple change and doubled their engagement. I do really hope that this style of post is done from a place of integrity and that these stories that are being told are true. In which case, I do think that this will encourage more educational content online to be taught by people who have actually achieved those things and sort of discourage these people who are simply regurgitating tips that they've seen other people share. So I think that would be a real positive of this style of content. Second, I mentioned creators being at the centre of content again instead of the audience, and I use that word creator intentionally there because even big businesses with multiple, maybe even hundreds or thousands of employees are putting people at the centre of their content. So if you think about the ads that you see, especially on TikTok, there's been a huge shift towards UGC, user-generated content, and also employee-led content. So Currys and Hobbycraft are two brilliant examples of this. Content becomes less about the products sold in those shops and more about the staff that are on the shop floor. Now, of course, the products are there in the background. They're wearing their uniforms. Sometimes they might even be talking about deals or offers that are on. But there's so much personality in those posts. And they're not telling a story in the traditional sense of start, middle, end. But they are almost world building. They're bringing you into the store even if you're just sat on your phone. They're letting you get to know the staff. They're really humanising the brand. And the final way that I thought I would call out, which is quite similar to the first point around educational content in disguise, testimonials in disguise. And I'm seeing business owners get much more confident at telling client stories and sharing client transformations, which I am loving. So sharing one screenshot of a lovely Google review onto your grid, even onto your stories, to be honest, is not going to do a whole lot anymore. I'm not sure if it ever did, but certainly maybe like 5 years ago, that was maybe more the done thing. So yes, it's great to showcase that you've got happy clients, absolutely. But in order for it to have impact, and that's the key word really for this episode, is impactful marketing, you've got to tell the story. So lean into the emotions of how that client was feeling, the changes that they experienced from working with you. Allow the audience to really relate to where that client was, the struggles that they were facing, the pain they were feeling, or aspire to the wins that they then achieved. That is so much more engaging than, Naya was great, 5 stars. I would love to know if you've noticed any of these shifts too, or maybe if you haven't, let me know if you now start spotting it as you scroll. Something else that I feel falls under this umbrella of storytelling content is creating a content series. And this is where I really think that we can be inspired by other media sources. So for example, TV shows. I am currently rewatching How I Met Your Mother, and Ted Mosby would 1000% be a TikTok girly. He would be so viral. Ted spends 200 episodes telling his kids the story of how he met their mother. And we're not going to talk about the ending because if you've watched it, you'll know it's mildly disappointing. But he does tell this story in a really engaging way. Gotta give it to the guy. So most episodes begin in the same way. Ted will allude to a main plot point, whether that is something that's significant and we get to hear about later that episode, or it might be something that we find out in the next series. But he kind of hints towards it and he'll say like, I'll get to that. So now for us as the audience, we're hooked and we want to know who the mother is. And throughout he trickles in other little recurring jokes and themes. We learn about his friends and other characters. For example, there's a yellow umbrella, which we know becomes significant, but we don't find out why for about 7 or 8 seasons. And we get familiar with the regular settings, so each of their apartments where they live, the bar downstairs where they hang out, the office where Marshall and Barney work. And if you want to create a series that your audience will love and get invested in, and even extending this to building a brand beyond your business on social media, there are so many lessons in here for us. So think about what phrases do you say to start or end your videos, or what phrases could you say every time you start or end one of your videos? Do you wear your brand colours or use the same backdrop when you film so that your audience get that same sense of familiarity of your content as they do with their favourite TV show? Are you giving your audience a reason to keep watching and excited to come back for more? You don't need a super complex 200-part series by any means, but there are certainly things that we can take from the shows and films that we love. And this feels like a good place to jump into a recent DM dilemma. Chantal sent me a question on this topic. She asked, how often should someone post a series? Now, I think there are two main approaches to creating a series in your content. There's a limited series where you have a finite number of posts or finite number of parts to that series. Maybe you're sharing 10 recipes in 10 days, or come with me while I do X thing for 30 days and document the journey. The audience will become invested in the end of that story. Or there's a signature series, something that becomes expected from your content, and this is the more world-building familiarity side of storytelling content. If you are doing a finite series, then I think it has to be more frequent. But it is for a shorter period of time, so hopefully then it can be more sustainable. If it's documenting a journey, that's likely going to be a daily post. So if you're doing like, come with me while I try this skincare for 30 days and I'll show you the impact, then that has to be daily. But if you are posting something like that, then I think for anything longer than, honestly, like 7 days, it's intense. So it can 100% be an incredible way to get your audience invested in your story, in you, but it is a real commitment. And the thing about finite series is that often you are sharing with your audience up front about how many parts there's going to be. That's usually part of the catchy headline and what keeps everyone coming back to check in for the, like they might think they might see your first video on day 8 and they'll go back and binge the first 7, and then they'll be like eagerly awaiting then for day 9. So it's harder to ditch if you get halfway through and decide it's too much work. If you're going to do that, then start recording and editing a good few days ahead of yourself so that you've got the buffer if life gets in the way and everything goes a bit tits up. With a signature series, that's playing the long game. A signature series isn't usually announced as a series, it becomes one. You decide that you really enjoy creating a certain style of content, or you notice that your audience love it when you talk about a particular topic, and you lean into that. I am really enjoying voiceover videos at the moment. I enjoy watching them and I find them fun to create. Now, that might not be considered a series yet, but I believe that it can become one if I continue to lean into that style and if I pick a repeat topic or end it with a certain catchphrase each and every time. Some other examples that you might be familiar with, there's a girl called Sophie on TikTok. I think she's called Sophie. I'm now doubting myself. And she does challenges to show that embarrassment is a choice. That's her message. Embarrassment is a choice. You're only embarrassed if you let yourself be embarrassed. And she'll go up to people in the street and ask them, oh, would you mind holding my phone and filming this while... And then she'll do something silly, like she'll dance in public or shout to the camera like, hi, Mom, look at all the friends I've made when she's on holiday. And it's simply a repeatable format that she does over and over, and she's become known for it. Or there's a creator called Shabazz Says, who sits in his hoodie and he stitches videos of people refilling their posh ice trays in the freezer or stocking their fridges, and he is super sarky. He's always saying, like, on today's episode of I'm Rich, You're Poor, when you wouldn't know what I'm talking about because you're a povo. And he's really become known for that catchphrase. As controversial, whatever you might think about that catchphrase, he's definitely become known for it. Or Mary. I love Mary on TikTok. Mary Gomez, I think is her surname. Every TikTok begins with, hi, I'm Mary and I'm learning English by myself. And she'll talk through new words that she's learned. She'll tell you something about her day to help her practice her English. And I can think of so many of these examples now. I could just sit here all day and be like, oh, have you seen this one? Have you seen this one? But that's exactly the point. Loads of these are springing to mind as I'm talking about it because they're memorable, All of these creators have made countless videos in these formats, and they never announced this as a series. They just happened. But all of these repeatable formats are what make them memorable. It keeps you watching, it keeps you going back, and it lets you get to know them for that thing. And I know if I was ever to have more than one type of ice in my freezer, my brain is likely to be going on today's episode of I'm Rich, You're Poor. But back to the original question of how often should you post a series? With this style, with the signature series, it doesn't need to be daily. It doesn't need to be your every single post. You may have a few signature series running alongside each other at any given time. But if you do want it to stick and you want to get known for that style, that phrase, that topic, then you've got to put in the reps with these videos. Or any type of content really. These examples are all video based, but you could absolutely do this with another format. Sophie at Pretty Little Marketer does absolutely banging carousels, and she's known for those. You recognise her style. They're always amazing. But the most important thing is repeating yourself and doing something that is unique to you. So, using storytelling to create impactful marketing. Take it further than surface level. Tell your stories, tell your clients' stories, share content that becomes impossible to copy word for word because it's so true to you and what your audience know you for. You don't need to so clearly put your audience into the content anymore. If you tell the stories with their wants and needs in mind, they'll put themselves into the content. They'll recognise themselves in the stories you tell, whether that's in the struggly start, in the messy middle, or they're aiming for that end goal. And if you want to create a content series to dial up the storytelling even more, then choose your fighter. You've got finite series, great for documenting a transformation, usually a bit more intense and shorter term, or a signature series, an ongoing series that has an unlimited number of parts to it, and it has a certain style or theme that you can become known for over time. Do let me know if you want me to dive into any of what I've covered in today's episode in more detail, and I would love to know your takeaways as well from today's episode. So if you do decide to start a series, please drop me a DM and then I can cheer you on. And on that note, of course, we're ending the episode with a cheesy quote. This one feels very Walt Disney, but it's actually from an American author called Jonathan Gottschall. Definitely butchering the pronunciation there. But okay, quote time. We are, as a species, addicted to a good story. Even when our bodies go to sleep, our mind stays up all night telling itself stories. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, then please make sure you hit follow, and if you can, share it with a pal who you think would enjoy it too. And of course, I'm wishing you a glorious rest of your day. Speak to you next week. Bye!